My Lords, with the leave of the House, I shall repeat an answer to an urgent question made by the Minister for the Constitution in the other place. The contaminated blood scandal of the 1970s and 80s was an appalling tragedy that should never have happened. Victims and their families have endured so much pain and hardship, and they deserve answers about how this could have happened. I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady for bringing this issue to the House today and for her leadership, alongside the Honourable Member for Worthing West, Sir Peter Bottomley, of the all-party parliamentary group, which has done such consistent and constructive work on this issue. As honourable members will know, following the Prime Minister's announcement in July last year that there would be an inquiry into these terrible events, the Department for Health launched a consultation on what the form and scope of that inquiry should be. I would like to thank all those who have contributed to that process. We understand how difficult and painful making describing these events must have been. The responses to that consultation were carefully considered by Cabinet Office officials. As a result, we confirmed that the inquiry would be statutory, established under the Inquiries Act, and we moved sponsorship of the inquiry from the Department of Health to the Cabinet Office. Before Christmas, we announced that the inquiry would be chaired by a judge. We have asked the Lord Chief Justice to provide us with a nomination. We hope to announce the name of that judge very soon. Once the appointment has been announced, the Cabinet Office will have early discussions with the Chair about setting up the inquiry and will encourage the Chair to quickly hold further consultation with the affected communities over the inquiry's terms of reference. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I want to reiterate again that I, the Minister for the Cabinet Office, and the Prime Minister are determined that those affected by this appalling tragedy get the answers they deserve.
My Lords, I'm most grateful to the Noble Lord for repeating that answer. I perhaps would remind the House that I did have some ministerial responsibility for this area some years ago. My Lords, it's now been over 6.5 months since the Government first committed to an inquiry into this tragedy. My Lords, it's disappointing that we're still waiting for an inquiry chair to be appointed, but I have noted with a great deal of interest what the Noble Lord said today, and my Lords, may I echo his tribute to the two co-chairs of the all-party group that he referred to. My Lords, he said that it's hoped that a chair will be appointed as soon as possible. I just wondered if he could set out whether there is an outline timetable as to when the terms of reference will be agreed with the chair and when the formal setting up date for the inquiry is likely to be set. My Lords, could I also ask him about terms of reference? We know how important it is to get the terms of reference right. I understand that the people affected would like the chairman of the inquiry and not the minister to consult with them on the terms of reference before they are formally set. Can I ask the Noble Lord whether he will give that consideration? And could he also confirm the terms of reference will cover the aftermath as well as the run-up to the tragedy?
I'm grateful to the Noble Lord for that very constructive response, and I endorse what he said about the all-party group. Also, the Haemophilia Society have been very active in this area for many years. I expect the chair to be announced in days rather than weeks. That's how I interpret the very shortly commitment that was given in another place. On the terms of reference, they will indeed fall to the chairman to determine, and before he does so, he will want to consult, as the Noble Lord suggested, the affected community on the terms of reference. Once he's done so and has made a recommendation to the Minister for the Cabinet Office, I anticipate there'll be another statement to the House setting out what the scope of the inquiry will be. He asked a final question about whether the terms of reference will include what happens afterwards as well as what happens before. As I said a moment ago, we expect the chair to consult on the terms of reference, and I'm sure he will take on board the point the Noble Lord has just made in drawing up the terms of reference which he submits to the government.
My Lords, I declare sadly an interest. I'm sure some in the House know that my nephew died. He he was a victim of the contaminated blood scandal. Concerns over the timing have been voiced. I wanted to get assurance from the noble lord who mentioned the Haemophilia Society, and I don't know how aware he is of some disquiet and concern amongst the haemophiliac community about the society, and I wanted assurance that the Haemophilia Society would have no special status in this, because there are a vast number of the victims who feel that the Haemophilia Society contributed to the scandal rather than alleviated it, and I would seek his assurance on that. And that does not reflect on the noble lady, the Baroness, who is now chairing, president of the Haemophilia Society. This scandal has gone on for 40 years, and this was, but it still is very, very important to those who are affected that they not feel that the Haemophilia Society has a special ear to the chair or to the government. And secondly, in terms of the terms of reference, I really just wanted assurance that they would be broad enough to catch the harms that were done, and indeed, additionally, that the victims would have the ability to input to those terms of reference.
I'm grateful to the noble lady, and very sorry indeed to hear that she lost a nephew as a result of this tragic sequence of events. I looked at the Haemophilia Society website earlier today, and I did pick up the controversy that the noble lady has just referred to. I think they will be important but not exclusive witness givers to the terms of reference, and I'm sure the chair will be aware of the very anxieties that she has just referred to. We want to ensure that all those who want to give evidence are able so to do, and I hope the chair will take the advice of many of those who gave evidence that there should be a regional dimension to this inquiry, and people shouldn't have to come to London if they want to give evidence.
My Lords, could I ask the Minister, will Scotland and England be treated the same, and will the inquiry cover all the countries involved, like Northern Ireland and Wales, Scotland and England? There has been some problems. If you live in Scotland and you got contaminated in England, or vice versa, over compensation, because I was dealing with one case.
I'm grateful to the noble Baroness. This is a UK inquiry. It is a problem that affected the whole of the UK. There are provisions under the Inquiry Act for consultation to take place with the devolved parliaments and devolved assemblies, but it is a UK inquiry. There is a specific issue about the arrangements that have been made for helping those who have suffered, and that is a devolved responsibility, and I think those particular responsibilities may differ in Scotland to the rest of the UK.
My Lords, whilst welcoming the government's initiative in this matter, may I ask the noble Lord a question about an inquiry that was conducted about 10 years ago by the late Lord Archer, a former law officer. I think it was privately commissioned, but it was publicly published thereafter, and I think the recommendations were accepted by the government of that day. Can you tell us something more about that study, which apparently was a very searching and indeed a very revealing study into this matter?
Well, the noble lord is asking a question which is right at the extremity of my familiarity with this subject, but I did look up, and the noble lord is quite right that there was an independent inquiry in the early 2000s by the former Solicitor General for England and Wales, Lord Archer. As I understand it, it held no legal, no official status at all. It was unable to subpoena witnesses or demand the disclosure of documents. But it did look at some of the issues, and it discovered that some important documents had been destroyed. There was issues of missing evidence. After he reported, Lord Jenkin, who was also a former Secretary of State, voiced his difficulties about obtaining documents for the inquiry. So that is available. It will be available to the statutory inquiry, and I hope they'll be able to build on some of the work that the noble Lord Archer undertook.
Thank you very much.
My Lords, I wonder whether the Minister could give an assurance to the House that the different groups of sufferers within this community will all be consulted by the Chair and the panel. There are of course widows, there are people still suffering, there are people with HIV, there are people who don't have HIV, and they've all been treated differently and many of them grossly inadequately over the years. And I think this is one of the concerns. I think people don't want the Haemophilia Society just to be the one group that are consulted, because people want to speak for themselves from these different situations. I mean, I would like to think the society would reflect everybody's interest, but I absolutely respect, the wishes of the different groupings, and that assurance would be very helpful to them, I think.
I'm very happy to give that assurance to the noble Baroness. As she may know, there were over 800 responses to the consultation that we launched in July, which concluded in October. So it is quite clear that there are a substantial body of people who take an interest in this subject, have already made representations, and I'm sure that the Chair will want to consult with a very wide range of people, survivors, relatives, before he finalises the terms of reference. He or she finalises the terms of reference.